Welcome to the third installment of the Co-op Perspective series. I'm here today with proud university partners who are proud parents of a member of the Northeastern University women's lacrosse team, Andy and Jenn Borggaard. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jenn, for joining me here at Columbus Place for the final chapter of our Co-op Perspectives video. I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to speak with both of you. Now, just to tee things off, Andy, as a Northeastern alumnus, can you tell us a little bit about your Northeastern experience and participating in the co-op program? Are there any memories that stand out for you?
Yeah. Well, how I found my way to Northeastern is unto itself a bit of a personal odyssey, maybe a story for another time. But the draw the whole time, and it's important from a contextual standpoint to understand where I came from. I grew up in really, really rural northern New York. And most of the kids I went to high school with, they were not thinking about ever going to college. And those that did, they went to colleges much more local to my hometown. So getting to Boston, for me, was important. Northeastern was super close to Fenway Park. I grew up in a Red Sox household. But the whole draw from the time I submitted the application was the co-op program. I didn't apply to any other colleges in Boston because the co-op program to me was my pathway to getting through college and then getting out in a quote unquote successful way. Came from a very modest household. How we were going to pay for college was definitely not from my parents' checkbook. And so the co-op program was an important answer to my parents asking, well, how are you going to be employed when you get out of college? But it also turned out to be a really important source of finances to actually get through college. So that was the draw from the beginning. I came here as an accounting major, not the sexiest of topics. I got pretty good grades my freshman year. And so fall of my sophomore year, it was time to go see the co-op advisor. And again, a 19-year-old from the middle of nowhere trying to navigate the job search process, that I would never have survived that but for the Northeastern Co-op program. Even then, the scaffolding they had around that process was amazing. A, how do you prepare a resume? B, what type of paper do you put on it? Put it on. How do you dress for an interview? What should you plan for as an interview? As a 19-year-old, that's really, really critical information. And that was all laid out for me. And so, the woman said, look, you did really well in accounting last year. There's this accounting firm downtown called Coopers & Lybrand. And it's now PwC, which is, I think, the second largest accounting firm in the world. But they've got this new program where they take 2 sophomores, and if you want to sort of progress, they'll be bringing you back each year. Okay. I didn't really know who Coopers & Lybrand was, didn't really know what it meant to go work at what was then a Big 8 accounting firm, now they're Big 4. But I said, sure. And that was the beginning of my co-op journey. I did think about, then it was a 5-year program at Northeastern, my 5 years of going elsewhere, but stayed the path. And, by the time I graduated, I had almost 2 years of real work experience, such that I knew exactly what I was going to be doing the day I started full time. And for me, it was a huge confidence booster. Again, that important context of sort of where I came from and where I was going, and allowing me to mature in the professional workspace a little bit at a time, go back to college life, then go back to the workspace. That was really, really important to me, sort of, again, getting through college and answering the question my parents were asking, which is, hey, where are you going to work? And also, it turns out it paid really well. And it also solved for helped solve for that other issue of how am I going to pay for this place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really cool point that you touched on, is that it gave you 2 years of work experience before even graduating. That's kind of such a cool foundational aspect of the program. So you said you stayed there for both of your co-ops?
So back in the day, if you went the normal route, there were 4 co-ops. And so I did 3 6-month co-ops and then a 3-month co-op. So I had 21 months of professional experience. And the co-op I did my senior year, I was essentially working side by side with folks who had already started full time. And there was virtually no difference in the expectations of me and how I was evaluated.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, there's a level of maturity there that I'm sure a recent graduate from another institution might not necessarily have as a Northeastern co-op student would have going into their first full-time position.
Yeah, I was also, on the other end of the spectrum, later in my professional life, I actually became an employer of Northeastern co-op students. And the story of how I convinced my colleagues at the software firm I was at to do that that's an interesting story unto itself. But, I can say both from a student employee's perspective and from an employer's perspective that the Northeastern co-op is hugely differentiated from any other quote unquote summer internship program that students embark upon from other schools. To me, there is just a massive chasm between the two. And it stems from a couple things. One is the length of time that both the student employee and the employer invest in each co-op, 6 months. That's dramatically longer than the typical summer internship, which is 8 weeks. That allows for the employer to justify the investment of time and money in training the student co-op employee. And it also gives the student co-op employee a chance to actually do work that's meaningful to the employer. The typical summer internship, I don't want to sound too pejorative, but it really is a show and tell recruiting exercise and not much more. And so for me, as you can tell, I'm intensely proud of what Northeastern it did for me, but also what it did for my daughter, Emma, which I assume we'll talk about in a little bit. But it really is a very different product that Northeastern offers to students compared to what I think students will get even in the best of colleges elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It really just leans into Northeastern's principle of just constantly innovating in making sure that the students are innovating both in the classroom and outside in the workforce. And that's very cool. And, thank you. It's been really cool hearing you talk about, your perspective as a co-op student, your perspective as an employer, and, your perspective as a parent. I actually do want to talk about Emma a little bit. Jenn, what kind of criteria was Emma looking for when she was selecting a college? And then to the both of you, how did you feel when she decided to become a Husky?
Well, Emma actually didn't start at Northeastern. She was going through the college process, and she was debating Northeastern versus University of Richmond, where she ended up going her first year. And I think, we were both sort of puzzled by the two different schools being very, very different. But when University of Richmond clearly wasn't a good fit for her, and she started actively looking at transferring, Northeastern was by far her first choice, and was for us there were very many reasons why we thought it would be a great fit for her, and we were thrilled when she was admitted as a transfer student and came in as a sophomore or a second year here at Northeastern. We have the experience that Andy had, which was so positive, and we had other friends whose kids have gone here more recently, and for her, the idea of coming to a school that was had a lot more experiential learning and hands-on and concrete education for our daughter, that was particularly appealing. Some kids are happy to go study philosophy and think big thoughts. That definitely was not her. And so being at a school where also her peers were focused on learning and working both at the same time, and weren't just coming to school for, whether it's the party experience or the typical college experience. She wanted something real and hands-on, and this was, a perfect fit for her. So we were thrilled when Northeastern admitted her, and she was thrilled as well. So
That's very cool. How did you feel knowing that she was going to go here?
I still get emotional. Intensely proud. I mean, it's not that deep, right? But it was really a special moment. And what was been so great is how much Emma has made Northeastern about her, not about her family. We have a little bit of a legacy going on. My Uncle Roger was here in the 60s. He was a stalwart member of Ernie Arlette's crew teams in the early days, but and he was somebody who sort of seeded the Northeastern thoughts with me. But when she showed up, she immediately sort of took to the place in a way that was really warming for me. And what I told her as she was coming into Northeastern, I said, look, there's two ends of the spectrum for college life. There's the work hard at your academics, and in the case of Northeastern, work hard at your co-op, and the obvious sort of rewards for that will come. And then on the other end is the partying and socializing, a really important part of my college experience. That will also be there. I'm sure you're going to do great at that. So I don't really have any advice for you there. I said, but the in-between piece, there's this gap that if you don't fill it while you're in college, you will look back and it will be a squander. You will look back at it as a squandered opportunity. And thankfully for Emma, she took to, in her instance, she was a lacrosse player. She tried out for the women's club lacrosse team, got on, and that has become a huge part of her identity. And she's now the president of the club in her final year. They've been very successful as a team, competitively, and it's made for a really important Northeastern experience that complements what she's done in the classroom, and she's done quite well in the classroom. It's a shameless plug for Emma, and her co-op experience, her two co-ops, which the second of which has led to a full-time job that she'll start this summer.
Wow, congratulations to her. That's very, very exciting. You actually, that was kind of going to be my next question. Actually, was did you have any Northeastern specific advice to her? But it sounds like the both of you kind of have encouraged her to forge her own path here, because I think we both know, everybody here knows, that it's no secret that Northeastern is sort of a university of opportunity. I assume she's been taking advantage of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming in as a transfer student, also just post-COVID, she sort of had to make her own way and find a way to, connect with her classmates and peers in a different way. And I think she did that in a number of different ways. One was the lacrosse team, which was really her hook to, a lot of what became her social fabric. But she also joined a sorority here and jumped into social life that way. And I think she basically, she actually before she had a co-op, she actually also got a student, job on campus working, I think, in one of the Northeastern offices, for, I think, students with disabilities. So she just grabbed everything and squeezed as much as she could out of everything. I mean, honestly, this fall, while she was finishing her bachelor's, starting her master's, president of the lacrosse team, and working part-time at the company that she's eventually going to go work for, we were a little worried that maybe she was squeezing a little too much out of it. But in her own way, that's actually made her more successful at everything, she's done here. And from my perspective, there will be no regrets that she didn't, sort of take every opportunity she could to enjoy this place, the people, the professors, the classmates, and as I say, all the other opportunities that the school provides.
That's very cool. It sounds like Emma really is a true testament to how well-rounded Northeastern can help, shape a student, if that makes sense. It sounds like everybody leaves this university not only a better version of themselves, but just, kind of having the ability to do whatever they put their mind to, which sounds very cool.
I think that what you just said, it can really be accordioned out. That's maybe a gerund, I guess. But that whole maturation process, I feel as if here at Northeastern, it is much more dramatic than at a college that doesn't offer the co-op, because, someone comes here as an 18 or a 19-year-old and leaves as a 22 or a 23-year-old. As we all know, there's a massive amount of maturity that goes on in that time frame. And for most traditional colleges, it's through the academics, maybe through socialization, maybe through athletics. Here, with that professional experience that's layered in, that professional maturity, I think, makes a Northeastern graduate that much more prepared to hit, for the lack of a better cliche, hit the ground running, and really be prepared to sort of make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, I guess, obvious that like the real world preparation that Northeastern seems to offer their students is truly unmatched to just, like you said earlier, other institutions that have like summer programs. This co-op program really is just the cornerstone of Northeastern, and it's very, very cool to see the both of you witness that. Now, sort of to shift gears in that regard, Jenn, I have a question for you. I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories about Andy's co-op back when he was doing it, which we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, which is great, But that being said, have there been any striking similarities or differences between what you've heard about Andy's co-op experience to what Emma has told you about her co-op experience?
Well, I think obviously they're different generations, so a little bit of a different perspective. And, when Andy was co-op, he had the opportunity to, honestly, to travel the world with Coopers and Lybrand as he was doing expat tax returns in the Middle East. And so not only did he have this amazing work experience, he had this opportunity to travel that was, I think, new to him based on his, where he grew up, et cetera. That opportunity has not, been provided to Emma, but I do think she's had the opportunity to do, to explore the area that she's interested in at kind of two different ends of the spectrum. So she started her first co-op at a small hedge fund. I wouldn't say small, tiny hedge fund, but a newish hedge fund. And then she's done her most recent co-op, and then the years she's worked with them, and is going to work for a much larger, established, maybe you would argue one of the first hedge funds started in Boston. And so from my perspective as a mother and someone who's actually in the same industry, it's fascinating for me to watch her get the two different experiences, very different CEOs, two very different cultures, and realize that, that businesses are different culturally, and, have different missions, different visions, and having the ability to see both and work in an environment that's a little bit more startup-y and one that's a lot more institutionalized has given her, a breadth of experience that I think will serve her well in the future.
Yeah, that's very cool to hear. One commonality that, after talking to a number of alumni over the years that you kind of touched on with Emma's experience is that this sort of aspect with the co-op program kind of flies under the radar a little bit, where the co-op program can teach you what you want in your professional career, but at the same time, it can kind of tell you what you might not want in your professional career, whether it be a cultural fit, whether it just, it could be, frankly, a career choice.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's very cool that Emma was able to experience that, get sort of two sides of the coin for what she's doing. Yeah, that's very exciting. So, kind of touching on what we just talked about with Emma, one commonality that I found after talking to a number of alumni is that the co-op program sort of teaches you not only what you want to do, but it can also teach you what you don't want to do. And sort of what the Northeastern ethos is that it's almost in a way not encourages, that's not the right word, but they're okay with failure, and it's okay to fail and try again to understand what is the best fit for you in your career. Do you have any experience with that, Andy?
So I do. In a sort of, I'll hit this kind of diagonally. As an accounting major, I think I'm probably similar to a lot of people's experience who studied the same topic and pursued it professionally. It's not the sexiest. And I learned pretty quickly at Northeastern, okay, I'm pretty good at this, but I'm not sure I'm going to do this till retirement. And the co-op became a really important factor in driving me to what turned out to be probably just the right point. I ended up staying at Coopers and Lybrand for about 4 years after I graduated, and then I pulled the plug and went to law school. But while I was at Northeastern, I kind of knew there was a finite period for me being an accountant. But I learned by sitting in the professional workplace and watching folks come in from other jobs, leave for other jobs, to go get a graduate degree elsewhere, that, okay, I now know this is not forever. So therefore, it's okay to just say, I'm going to commit the time to finishing my degree, getting my CPA, which is an endeavor unto itself beyond merely graduating, and then I'll go do the next thing that I'm starting to sort of formulate. And so oddly, while the co-op experience, it showed me, I probably don't want to do this forever, but it's okay to do this for a certain period of time. And it showed me the value of what I could potentially get out of it, even if I go do something else later. And that, I think, is similar to the concept of some kids, they'll go do a co-op in a specific area and realize, oh, whoa, this is definitely not for me. And they'll course correct immediately. For me, it was, I don't want to bail on this now. And I'm really glad at this stage in life, I didn't bail, because there's a lot of things that I've leaned on from those early years of being a CPA that I still lean on. And so for me, it was just sort of setting it out. Like, let's set the path for when you will diverge and go somewhere else.
Like you said, Andy, I really liked what you said earlier about the value of what the Northeastern Co-op teaches you to do. From your co-op experience, you kind of touched on this earlier. What sort of doors opened for you, or what sort of opportunities presented themselves that may not have happened if you weren't participating in the program?
Well, like I said, if I were an accounting major at a college other than Northeastern, where I didn't get the co-op experience, I think there would have been a dramatically higher probability that I would have changed majors. Because I would have said, yeah, I don't see it. This is not me. I don't get the value proposition, et cetera. I'm sure those weren't the words I used at the time, but those concepts. So the co-op was enough of a, okay, it showed me the value in the short to intermediate term that sort of allowed me to rationalize, I'm going to stay the course. And thank God I did, because as I alluded to earlier, even though I stopped practicing as a CPA in my 20s, I let my license lapse because it was too hard to keep up with the professional education requirements, and I became a lawyer. Almost immediately, when I started interviewing for law firm jobs, that CPA experience was always one of the first topics somebody wanted to talk about. And so in getting my next professional gig, really important, validator of how I had spent my life pre-law school. But then as my career morphed into, I became a deal lawyer, and then ultimately that turned into becoming just a sort of more generalized business leader. That accounting experience was and continues to be so valuable. I mean, even today, where I'm basically just doing nonprofit volunteering, my accounting experience is frankly a huge value add for the organizations where I spend time. And without that co-op glue, as it were, sort of glued me to that lane, that wouldn't have played out. And look, I'm sure something else might have come up. I might have gotten on track somewhere else and it would have worked out just fine, but I'm not so sure. And so that's what I always think about is that co-op sort of kept me going for the right amount of time before then I could sort of logically say, all right, it's time to change.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. And it sounds like that it really, with you and everybody else that I've spoken to about the co-op program, it really is just laying the framework for what you want to do later in your career. And that's really great. Now, I do want to shift gears again a little bit, talk about Emma and her co-op experience. It sounds like she has a job offer. That's very, very exciting. Now, for the both of you, from both of your perspectives, after talking to Emma about her co-op experience with her programs, how would you say that the Northeastern co-op program prepares students for entering the workforce for the first time?
Well, the one thing I would say is, as I said, Emma was a transfer student, so she was a little behind in some of her Northeastern requirements when she first got here. Even though she'd had a full year of college, she hadn't fulfilled the requirements of Northeastern's business program. And what I thought was frustrating at the time, but actually appreciate why it's done, is that she wasn't allowed to apply for a co-op for a full year. So she was really almost a year behind her peers. But because of that, by the time she got into her first co-op, she actually had the building blocks of the finance background that she needed to be a successful co-op. Northeastern is not going to just send kids out and put them in a position where they're not going to succeed or they don't have the opportunity to succeed. And so while at the time it was kind of hard and she was trying to figure out how she was going to catch up to her peers, I think what Northeastern's doing makes sense, right? We don't want to put kids or employers in the position of having someone, in their workspace who doesn't actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For lack of a better phrase, Northeastern is very good at adding tools to the toolbox for everybody before sending them off. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to what Jenn said, so coming at it from a slightly different perspective than just a parent, in my later professional life, I was working for a software company in Boston, as I mentioned earlier, and we were going through the classic hockey stick growth up and to the right, and we could not hire the talent we needed, an emphasis on the word talent. We weren't just looking for bodies to fill seats. We were looking for talented folks to handle what seemed like mundane work, which is frontline customer support, but is critical to our entire business model. And so I endeavored to try to convince my colleagues around the table, hey, let's think about the Northeastern program. And I tried to emphasize, it's not just a summer internship. This would be a meaningful 6 months, so we would get return on our training dollars and time. B, the student would be less expensive than a college graduate. And C, this could become ultimately an automatic pipeline of talent that comes to us automatically upon graduation. Unfortunately, this was a while ago where Northeastern was still building its reputation from an academic standpoint. I had some colleagues that were college snobs and weren't quite ready to sort of open the doors to Northeastern. Lord knows how they let me in there in the first place. But nevertheless, we did a couple trial runs, one or two, and it was pretty quick that we realized, we as an organization, we as a company, realized what I suspected all along, was that this is a no-brainer. Northeastern, again, you go back to some of the building blocks things. There's what they teach in the classroom to get students ready, but then also how they prepare them for the job interview search process itself. It comes through very, very clearly when you're on the hiring end. oh wait, I have to remind myself, this isn't a college graduate. This is just someone who's got 2 years left in college. And they look and talk and feel and perform at basically the same level. And that ultimately, for me, has always been like the co-op experience. It is a no-brainer from both a student's perspective as well as from a hiring company's perspective.
That's very cool. I really like the idea that, to steal your word, it's a pipeline. It really sounds like that not only does the co-op program uplift the students, but it's really great that it's uplifting the employers as well. That's very cool. Now, I do want to just take a moment and thank you both for coming in this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I do have one final question for the both of you. And as both of you are continuous supporters of Northeastern University, I would just love to hear what sort of impact you're looking to make here.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
So as you can tell, I'm intensely proud as both an alumni and even more proud as a parent. So I'm cut me and I bleed Northeastern red, right? But there are things that we've thought about that where we could help impact improving Northeastern's academics or student life. But the reality is this place is really expensive. And while we were able to afford to send Emma here, this is not an attainable destination for a large swath of college-going folks. And so I think ultimately as philanthropists, to the extent we can, I think access would probably be where we would want to help. And there's been a scholarship fund that was named in the name of one of my college roommates' father, who used to work here, that I've been donating to for a long time, and it's funded a bunch of students, and I get letters every year explaining their journey, and it's really cool. And I think that's probably an area where we obviously need to agree on this, but that's an area where I think we would probably try to impact.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andy's story from the beginning tells you about, his ability to come to college and to come to Northeastern was somewhat dependent on the fact that at that time, a co-op could actually almost pay for their tuition with their co-op earnings. We're not in that place anymore at Northeastern. I mean, college tuition across the board has gone up. But I think that's the area that, needs the most focus probably. And so we will continue to be focused on ourselves.
That's great. Thank you so much for the support. The university appreciates it. Thank you for everything. And thank you again for taking time this afternoon to sit with me and talk about your co-op perspectives as parents. I had a blast. I hope you had a blast as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.